Hi everybody, welcome back to the Political Science Optional. We're going to continue our discussion on paper 1B and we are discussing caste, religion, ethnicity in Indian politics. Okay. In the very first, the previous lecture, we have just tried to understand caste overall. Today we're going to continue with that discussion and also then discuss the new trends in this, right? So when we are looking at caste, religion, ethnicity in Indian politics, okay, just a very quick recap of the previous class. So we were discussing caste in the Indian politics. Now here what have we all discussed? Basically what is caste, right? We've made a mention of Louis Dumont and M.N. Srinivas. We have also seen, for example, the phases, the different phases here. The very first phase which talks about caste simply being a tool for social stratification, social hierarchy. And then after our independence, we have seen that one, it becomes an important tool for electoral calculations, electoral arithmetic. And of course, in the later periods, for example, 1980 onwards, we had also seen that how caste becomes a very important part, okay, of political assertion, right? And the moment I say political assertion, we have seen how the numerical strength over a period of time has translated itself, right? More numbers has translated into political power, right? So the translation of numerical strength into political power is again something that we've had a look at, right? So this of course becomes an important part, important section of the different phases, right? So one, social hierarchy, social stratification. Second, participation, so democratic mobilization. And third one, how numerical strength can lead to political participation. To understand that, we had also discussed, in fact, in good detail, the analysis presented by Rajni Kothari in the book Caste in Indian Politics, right? We have also understood for what is secularization of caste, right? We have seen terms like politicization of caste and casteization of politics, the meaning of both of them, one having a more positive meaning which leads to more democratic representation, and the second one telling us that it can have a very myopic, a more, let's say, narrow outlook on the Indian politics. So both the terms politicization of caste and casteization of politics, both of them we have had a look at. All right. Now, so what is caste? We've had a look at. What are the different phases we've had a look at, right? Third thing we were discussing, in fact, was the overall impact, I can say, and we've seen the impact from an evolutionary angle also. We've seen the analysis presented by Sudipta Kaviraj. We've seen the analysis presented by Yogendra Yadav, the different two democratic upsurge. One which talked about how Congress hegemony has been taken down, and the second is when you have more OBC and let's say the mobilization of Dalits. That also is an impact, right? So what the impact wise, we have seen few things. One is Yogendra Yadav, democratic upsurge. We have seen Christophe Jeffrelot, silent revolution, right? You are more than welcome to write these terms when you write your answers. Okay, important phrases. So across newspaper articles, you will find these phrases. So you can always use that, right? This all we had seen. And we had ended our class. In fact, one thing also, a specific paragraph I also had told you about the Dalit assertion, how Ambedkarite politics has also transformed. Initially, they were only seeking a support and almost were dependent on a section of people. But now, autonomous political assertion also has begun, which also signifies we've seen the examples. If you try to remember, KHAM, Gujarat, MY, okay, and we have seen other cases or examples, right? Bahujan Samaj Party, etc. So that part we had seen. And lastly, we had also seen the concerns around it. We had seen the concerns almost raised by CP Bhamri, okay? That this is, of course, can also be problematic. This can lead to fragmentation of national unity. It can create more dividing lines, okay? And that is again something, because when you analyze it, you see both things, right? And this thing is also very well captured by a very prominent phrase that we say that in India you have the coexistence of modernity as well as tradition, right? Both those two things will go hand in hand, right? Modernity is also there, tradition is also there, right? So that is again something that we haven't had a look at. And then we also went with the criticism of this, right? Now, normally you prepare this topic to this depth, okay? So one thing is you have to be very sorted till here. But I want you to go even one step beyond, right? So which means I would also, at least in the first part today, we should also be aware about the recent trends, right? So what are the recent trends which are there, right? We'll have a look at it. So in this section, first what I'll do, we had written the write-up almost till this part, till criticism. So first we will end that section, right? And then you can maybe write in another node of this mind map, and wherein we talk about the recent trends. Now, I will want to have these recent trends for each of the topics. So we'll do this for caste in Indian politics. Yes, we'll do it in religion aspect also, and we'll also do it in the ethnic aspect. Not it depends on the nature of question that is asked, right? See, most of the questions you will be able to answer from this basic analysis also. That is more than enough. But let's say the examiner pay, let's say takes a cue from this. We've seen the caste census, etc. Okay, and caste census you can think of as the manipulation of data. Okay, how data politics also can be caste driven. This can also create more challenges, etc. So that also is a very, very important aspect that one can look into and talk about, right? So we can delve from this, and we can include the data, or let's say the arguments which we have done here. So whenever you get a question from a recent aspect, do not forget to add the static components to that, okay? And I'll explain you today only how to do that, right? So the very first thing that we'll do, we've seen till criticism. So one is we will have a simple conclusion overall of the topic, and then we'll write a separate heading. First I'll explain to you the recent trends, and then we will also have a write up on the trends, and after that I'll go into the religion aspect, okay? What are the recent, or in general, what is the impact of religion on Indian politics, okay? Which also is an extension of how modernity and tradition is there, and this is also a very characteristic feature of the developing countries, okay? The developing countries, like we've discussed as per FW Riggs, these are prismatic societies. In the prismatic societies you do not see a single monolithic entity, but you see what? People fractured across various social cleavages. That is what I started my lecture with in the previous section. Right? I hope that part is clear. So let's have a look at that as well. Okay. So let us first conclude what we were doing in the previous class, and after that I'll move into the next section. Okay. So we'll write a couple of lines, and then we move into the recent trends now. Okay. So you can write this. Okay, let's come back to our page. In fact, if you have written, we have seen, and we've ended. So in the criticism, we had written the Marxist perspective, and then we had ended with CP Bhamri. Okay, I hope till here. So now let's write that. What is the conclusion? And then move to this part, right? So write this as, right, thus, the transformation of caste under democracy, the transformation of caste under democracy is neither linear. The transformation of caste under democracy is neither linear nor uniformly emancipatory, nor uniformly emancipatory. The transformation of caste under democracy is neither linear nor uniformly emancipatory. Full stop, right? It represents a complex, it represents a complex dialectic. It represents a complex dialectic, right? Put a dash and write caste has been democratized. Caste has been democratized, yet democracy continues to be mediated by caste. Okay, this again will tell you almost like a paradox, right? Caste has been democratized, yet democracy continues to be mediated by caste. Democracy continues to be mediated by caste. Full stop, then right? It has empowered, it has empowered historically marginalized groups. It has empowered historically marginalized groups, yet it has also entrenched identity calculations. It has also entrenched identity calculations within within electoral politics. Within electoral politics. Within electoral politics. Okay. So it has also entrenched identity calculations within electoral politics. Okay, full stop. Then right. The central debate, therefore, the central debate, therefore, is not whether caste exists in Indian politics. The central debate, therefore, is not whether caste exists in Indian politics, but whether its political mobilization, but whether its political mobilization contributes to substantive equality, contributes to substantive equality, or reinforces, or reinforces segmented pluralism. Okay, so this also is something that we can say, that whether it simply leads to political mobilization. Okay, so whether that, so there are two things that we have seen here. Okay, so whether can I say this is substantive equality, right? Second term that I had said was whether it leads to, or whether it reinforces segmented pluralism, right? So whether is it substantive equality, something that we've seen through Western political thought as well. Okay, that whether the integration of people right from the democratic, let's say, right to vote, which means universal adult franchise, whether it leads to this or it leads to segmented pluralism. There is a segment also being created, and this is something that we've also understood through terms like politicization of caste and casteization of politics, right? Full stop, then right. The Indian experience suggests that, the Indian experience suggests that Caste, caste, once an instrument of exclusion, caste, once an instrument of exclusion, has become both a vehicle of empowerment. Okay, and you use this line, the last line is also important. And this you can use not just for this, but even for religion or even ethnicity. That X, so you can add any of the phrase here, has become an instrument. Okay, get caste, once an instrument of exclusion, has become both, has become both a vehicle of empowerment, has become both a vehicle of empowerment and a site of competitive identity politics, and a site of competitive identity politics, reflecting a broader tension, reflecting a broader tension of a diverse and evolving democracy, of a diverse and evolving democracy, diverse and evolving democracy. Okay, this is the overall conclusion that we wanted to have here, right? A diverse and evolving democracy. Okay, now we want to first understand, so let us now focus here. We are discussing the recent trends, okay, with respect to, let's say, caste in Indian politics. So first we will see the older trends and what has shifted overall, and then we will try to expand on the trends that are available with us. Okay, so earlier, or in general, the focus was, so I'm writing here earlier so that the bifurcation is very clear to you. Earlier, the focus in this section happened to be, let's say, on politicization of caste. Okay, of course, I can talk about the Mandal Commission, which have happened to be a very important instrumental event. And third thing I can say is the emergence of dominant caste. For example, here, if you recall our previous class also, we had seen again M. N. Srinivas. We have seen terms previously also like elite capture, bullock capitalist, Rudolph and Rudolph. Okay, this is there. Now, the recent trend, if I want to mention some of the recent trends, so for example, I can talk about identity politics, right? Politics revolving around along any of the identity markers, which sometimes can also overlap with welfare politics. Second, the caste class connection. In fact, talking of this, we can also mention, if you've read the recent census debates, and in this more specifically, let's say if I mention the term caste census, with caste census, I can tell or mention how data, for example, we often use the term data is the new oil. But for example, we have very old census data. One is the broad census data that happens in every 10 years. But here we also link and keep in your mind delimitation commission. It has been set up till now at least 4 times. Okay, the freezing of seats. Remember 42nd and 84th Constitutional Amendment Act, and how the members are getting represented in the parliament, right? So not only the people of India overall, but also how these people are represented in the Lok Sabha, the House of People, right? So census debates are important. Similarly, caste census important, and within that, one more thing that has been in news is, for example, the question around sub-categorization. Okay, sub-categorization of castes, right? For this, there was a specific G. Rohini Commission, and the core argument here was basically made that even though we have reservation, okay, the benefits are cornered by a very small section, which happens to be the elite section in that group. So if the benefits are getting cornered only by the elite section, does it really mean true substantive equality? The answer is no, right? So even that is a point that can be argued, and that is something that we can again discuss. So when I am looking at the recent trends, what kind of things can be asked? One is, of course, the recent debates around subcategorization, how to weave our arguments around it, or the new caste, or let's say the census. Okay. And if I'm saying there is a caste class connection, can I also bring in one more topic here? What about gender? Now, after we're done with this unit, then again we'll go into the women movement of India. And then I'll also tell you that when I look at women movements in India, same thing. The women movement of the West versus the women movements of India are very different movement. And many times the criticism of women movements in India is that it does not truly represent the intersection, let's say, of class, caste, right? Because again in India you have women, let's say rural women have different issues, urban women have different issues. Even in rural women, the women who are from the different castes, they will have other issues as well. They will face social discrimination, and because of social discrimination, even their livelihoods are going to be impacted, right? So how a social aspect also becomes a economic aspect. So caste class connection is true, and on this you can also bring in the gender aspect, which is why we often say to remember Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw in intersectionality is what is being also talked about. That is also one major aspect that we need to know. So when I'm looking at the recent trends, okay, in India, especially in the caste politics, these are the few things that I also need to be aware about, right? Now the question then becomes, how do we articulate this, right? Here I can also use a keyword, data politics. Okay, that how this data can be used, right? And this will also affect the representation of members, like we've said, in the parliament. Okay, and in general this will also impact how our policies and schemes, etc., are being designed. So we will keep this also in mind though. So if you're looking at caste, of course the major part of discussion we've had a look at, okay, but what we also want to look at is the recent trends. So what I'll do first, we will discuss the trends here. First, I'll give you a basic, simple understanding, and after that, we will be writing it along with some of the scholar opinions as applicable in these recent trends. Okay, so I'm still continuing with the recent trends we are talking about in caste here, right? And one by one, we will discuss some of the issues that are there, right? What is the recent trends one has to look into? Okay, so one thing we will look at, that what has happened to welfare politics, okay, and mainly what is welfare politics in post mandal world. Are there any changes that have are there? So one has to also understand this, okay, and what are we looking at? Okay, so here we are looking into terms. Okay, of course we have seen direct benefit transfers, okay, that has been common here. And the moment you have direct benefit transfers, I can say we have now more welfare is more targeted. Direct benefit transfer helps us to prevent the leakages. That's a good step, right? Second thing, the welfare is very target, okay, oriented, okay. And in this you have seen the labharthis, right? So this is what identity based welfare. So even in the post Mandal world, when I'm looking at the labharthis, who are the intended targeted beneficiaries, how are we targeting them? Let's say through DBT or through certain targeted welfare. Okay. So here the debate that often comes in is what is happening to the caste identity. Is the caste identity getting lost because of welfare, or is it getting reinforced? Okay. So here the main argument becomes that the caste identity, first thing is not getting replaced, right? Of course, yes, there is a strong case to be made that we are looking at the labharthis and we're talking of welfare, but that does not mean that the caste identity has been replaced. So I'm just writing it, caste identity has not been replaced, even though we are talking about a lot of welfare politics, has not been replaced, right? And even now we can see some element of mobilization here, right? This is one, right? So we'll, one thing is this. Second thing, in fact I can write it here only, we'll just have a discussion on that as well. So we are talking about, so one is, let's say, the welfare politics. Second is, let's say, the caste census. Okay. So for example, Bihar was in news. Okay. And then there is some arguments were being made that we need newer data. For a new data, what do you need? You want to have a census that is to be done. Now when the census would be done, okay, so the point is this will give it a statistical recognition, okay, as opposed to merely symbolic representation, right? For example, this will make it more targeted. One would know exactly how many people are there, right? So I'm saying we would be getting statistical, you'll have facts in this regard, okay? And when you have facts, simple thing is, see, it will lead to more visibility, right? Because with data now we can quantify certain things, so you'll have visibility in that regard. Second thing, so apart from visibility, this can also help in the representation, better representation, right? So when I'm looking at the caste census overall, okay, and if let's say there is a periodic updation of data, so one thing is it gives you statistical recognition, you'll have, one has more visibility, better data representation. So even this is one important part, okay? Within this, if you try to recall, okay, one for example I told you was sub categorization. Now when I'm saying sub categorization, okay, and even here one is sub categorization and one we can also say is sub caste fragmentation. What is the meaning of this? So earlier, let's say their OBC overall as was one block. So then what is the change? Now the change is, for example, we can talk about non Yadav OBCs. Okay. So the point is, as a simple one entity, just I'm giving you one example here. Okay. We can have subcategorization here, okay, which means micro or overall we can have overall classification, right? So it is not one single entity. This can also help in more better, okay, mobilization, right or no? So instead of just looking at one big unit, and sometimes the benefits are also cornered by some small sections, which is again generally the elite section which is going to capture it. Can we also not say that even this can be is also being tried? This also tells you, okay. Then a thing which we have done, but even that is also a trend that is there. So we are again looking into, or we are seeing the dominant caste assertion. Okay. And again, if you look into the demands made for reservation, and in many sections, let's say, you have seen those demands also coming in, be it even Maharashtra, or maybe let's say, be it in the case of Rajasthan, or let's say Punjab, it has also been from the dominant sections. Okay, the demand for the reservation, and to make those demands, there has been again a lot of pressure that is put. So of course, there's a local support to that. So we are looking at the dominant caste reservations, right? So for example, I'm just giving you some example. The example of, let's say, the Maratha reservation demand. Okay, this was there in the news. We had seen a similar, the Patidar movement, the movements, right, in Gujarat, right? And it is not limited to this. The Jat agitation. So what are we seeing here? That still, of course, we've seen the analysis of M. N. Srinivas, but even in the recent trends, you are seeing again and again the dominant castes are asserting themselves. Okay. In fact, if you recall, uh, or you can also look it up later, that in GS1, in your mains GS1, you have Indian society. Okay. And in that, there was a very beautiful question UPSC had asked you in mains. And the question almost somewhere talks about that caste has lost its relevance in the 21st century or something, or in the Indian society. And the question in the question, they wanted to ask you, would you agree to the statement or would you disagree to the statement that caste has lost its relevance in the 21st century? And for questions like this, please remember, you cannot have simply a single answer that it has lost yes or it has lost or no, because you're seeing both the trends. In some cases, when you have a lot of globalization in the a lot of urban metro cities, you would see less, uh, at least relevance of caste. But to say that the caste has lost, no. You see a lot of songs, for example, okay, of people, let's say, probably flashing their caste, etc., in their cars, or like we've said, rap songs, etc., so on and so forth. You see both aspects being there. So, in almost a sense of globalization, there is an entity which maybe does not value caste as much. But to say that the caste has lost its relevance, not true. There are still, in some cases, maybe honor killings in some parts of India, khap panchayats going on, etc. So there are, you will see both these aspects being there. So there may be some aspect of modernity, but there will be an aspect of tradition in these cases also. So when I'm looking at the dominant caste assertions, okay, or maybe the demand, etc., so this again tells us what is happening. Okay, this tells us there is still a level of economic insecurity. There is an issue of food availability, food crisis. All of that is leading to a demand for reservation, right? And in fact, if you recall, or at least I'll tell you, Pratap Bhanu Mehta, I'll also quote him today again. Pratap Bhanu Mehta has also been critical of some of the policies of affirmative action or reservation, right? And again, there was a case that argument that is made that in the words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in fact, the name of his book, one of these very famous books, happens to be Annihilation of Caste. Okay, and he says that when the dominant castes are asking for reservation, there is an assertion of the dominant caste. Instead of instead of annihilation of caste, there is perpetuation of caste. There is perpetuation, which means it is getting more and more propagated, and it has gone to have it more, right? Even this is again a part that we are seeing, right? That is one. Now, in addition to this, we will see some new phenomena, okay, in the urban regions. And sometimes we say this as the new middle class. And when I'm saying middle class, does it have an impact, or does the caste have an impact here? Because how the marriage is being done, how, let's say, the different functions, social gatherings are being done, do you see an element here? This also is very mixed bag. In some cases, let's say, like I've told you, the urban metropolitan cities, you don't see as much caste playing a huge role. But if we look into the electoral mobilization, the party politics lines, the distribution of tickets for the constituencies, even this happens to be an important factor which plays an important role in the electoral calculations. So even this we can say, right? So now you will write the heading, we will write some of these points. If there's anything extra new, I'll also tell you that, right? And we will write some of the points, and I will also give you some of the analysis, okay, on these parts, okay. So the heading happens to be the same heading, the recent trends, the recent trends, recent trends, put a dash, caste in Indian politics, okay. Write it para by para. Almost each para will tell you a point that that I've discussed with you. So I'll give you some details. And for some of these points, I'll also give you maybe a particular scholar. For example, for these parts, you can safely quote the analysis of Pratap Bhanu Mehta. You can also quote Yogendra Yadav. He happens to write very good articles on this topic and subject, right? So that way one can cover these parts and areas, right? So, right, right, caste in Indian politics. Caste in Indian politics has not declined. Caste in Indian politics has not declined. Instead, instead, it has transformed. It has not declined. Instead, it has transformed. Full stop, right? Right. While earlier scholars, while earlier scholar focused on ritual hierarchy, this term I also have told you in the previous class. The earlier scholars focused on ritual hierarchy, ritual hierarchy, and Mandal era mobilization, ritual hierarchy and Mandal era mobilization, comma, the contemporary politics reflects, the contemporary politics reflects new new dimensions of caste. It reflects new dimensions of caste shaped by shaped by welfare regimes, welfare regimes, comma, data politics, welfare regimes, data politics, comma, economic insecurity, which tells you the reason for demands by a lot of dominant castes. So welfare regimes, data politics is the part that we've seen for the caste census, etc. Economic insecurity and digital assertion. In fact, this is also a point I'll tell you. Okay, be it social media, okay, digital domain for all the three, in fact, any domain, in fact, you can say, again, happens to be a very important medium, okay, of mobilization and of assertion. So one cannot at all ignore this aspect. Okay. Now now we'll start one by one. So right, change the paragraph, right? Or instead of changing the paragraph first, right, these trends indicate that caste has moved these trends indicate that caste has moved from being merely caste has moved from being merely a system of social stratification, a system of social stratification to a dynamic and adaptive political resource, to a and adaptive dynamic and adaptive political resource, dynamic and adaptive political resource. Dynamic and adaptive political resource. Okay, now change the paragraph now, right? First I'll take up welfare politics, then I'll move to caste, which is the data politics part, one by one. Okay, so right, one major shift is the emergence of welfare politics. One major shift is the emergence of welfare politics, which some analysts call as the Labharthi model. For Labharthi, in the bracket, write this as beneficiary, which some analysts call as the Labharthi model. Some analysts call this as the Labharthi model. Okay, full stop. Then write direct benefit transfers, DBT, direct benefit transfers, comma, subsidized housing, DBT, subsidized housing, cooking gas schemes, and targeted welfare programs. Cooking gas schemes and targeted welfare programs have created a cross caste beneficiary identities. They've created cross caste beneficiary identities. Cross caste beneficiary identities. Full stop, right? This does not eliminate caste consciousness, while this does not eliminate caste consciousness, it partially moderates it partially moderates a rigid caste block. It partially moderates a rigid caste block voting by creating a welfare based identity. By creating a welfare based identity. Okay, now just to understand the more nuance around this part, see, some people simply say that now there is going to be directly welfare being done, right? And if welfare is happening across the section, so does that dilute the caste based equations? So, for example, one scholar will support it, one scholar may also oppose it. I need to know both the views, okay, so that we understand what is the essence here. So, here you first write this as right. Scholars like Yogendra Yadav, Yogendra Yadav caution that they caution that welfare politics does not replace caste identity. Welfare politics does not replace caste identity, but works alongside it. It works alongside it. Full stop, right? Voter behavior, and we'll also have a proper lecture on voter behavior, right? For example, when I say political science, so a lot of psephologists, a lot of again people who have a background in this subject will want to understand voter behavior, right? And understanding the voter behavior is a very complicated thing. There are many factors, especially in the case of developing countries, on which let's say the voter is going to make his vote. Okay, so what we are now writing is that we are voting behavior often combines caste loyalty. Voting behavior often combines caste loyalty with welfare satisfaction. Caste loyalty with welfare satisfaction. Welfare satisfaction. Okay, full stop, right? Next, right? Another view, right? Pratap Bhanu Mehta argues that welfare expansion. Pratap Bhanu Mehta argues that welfare expansion may produce may produce a form of clientelist citizenship. A form of clientelist citizenship. A form of a clientelist citizenship where the citizens relate to the state, citizens relate to the states as beneficiaries. The citizens relate to the states as beneficiaries rather than rather than rights bearing equals. Rather than rights bearing equals. So basic idea is that the people do not consider themselves that they are the ones that it is their right to get the benefit. Instead, what we are saying is clientelist citizenship, right? So they would always think that they are almost working like a client. Okay, so here main thing is they would see themselves as beneficiaries. Okay, so when I'm looking at welfare politics, this is also a view, right? The citizens relate to the state as beneficiaries rather than rights dash bearing equals. Now here the view, the last point of Pratap Bhanu Mehta's view, right? Right. In this sense, welfare politics may dilute caste block rigidity. It may dilute caste block rigidity, but deepen patronage politics. But deepen patronage politics. Deepen patronage politics. Thus, thus, welfare schemes may soften, SOFTEN, welfare schemes may soften caste alignments. So this is a view. That's why I'm discussing in detail. Let's say the question says that now the welfare is happening without taking into account the caste considerations. So does it mean the caste has no relevance in the Indian society? No. It may have just softened it, but it will not remove it. And there are many other reasons why. Other trends are also emerging, right? So welfare schemes may soften caste alignments, but do not structurally transform caste hierarchies. Do not, they do not structurally transform caste politics. Okay. Now, let's come to the second part. Second we'll see is this. Now, right? Change your paragraph, right? Right? A second significant development, a second significant development is the politics of data. It is the politics of data and the renewed demand for a caste census. Renewed demand for a caste census. Right? Recent state level caste surveys, in the bracket right, Bihar. Recent state level caste surveys have revived the debates. They have revived the debates on proportional representation, right? That ultimately the representation should be based on the proportion. And if the data of the Mandal Commission, of course, is 1990, it's old. Population has also increased. So the representation should be proportional representation. That will be an argument. The reservation, the benefits should be allocated based on proportion. Okay, they have revived the debates on proportional representation and resource allocation. Full stop, right? Not right. Caste is no longer caste is no longer only about symbolic. Caste is no longer only about symbolic recognition. It is no longer only about symbolic recognition. Symbolic recognition. Instead, it is about statistical visibility. It is about statistical visibility and quantifiable entitlement and quantifiable entitlement. Quantifiable entitlement. Okay. Quantifiable entitlement. Now, right, the demand for updated caste data, the demand for updated caste data reflects a shift towards updated caste data reflects a shift towards evidence based claims evidence-based claims for reservation and representation which is transforming caste into a policy driven category transforming caste into a policy driven category with with democratic bargaining democratic bargaining. Okay. Okay, full stop. Right, the renewed demand for caste census the renewed demand for caste census reflects what scholars call, inverted commas may you write, politics of recognition, what scholars call politics of recognition, what scholars call politics of recognition. Okay, full stop. Now, let Christophe Jeffrelot, we've seen this few times. I'll write it again. Jaff Jeffrelot. Christophe Jeffrelot views the caste census demand. Okay, and again, these are the most recent topics. So these arguments, the idea that we are discussing directly, even if you see a question in the upcoming mains for PSIR, you can directly use it. Views the caste census demand as a continuation of Mandal politics, as a continuation of Mandal politics. Full stop. Next, right? Professor Gopal Guru argues that visibility through data is essential. Visibility through data is essential for historically marginalized groups because invisibility perpetuates inequality because invisibility invisibility perpetuates inequality invisibility perpetuates inequality, right? But there will also be a challenge here, right? So right, however critics warn the critics warn that excessive enumeration critics warn that excessive enumeration may entrench, it may entrench caste categories permanently, it may entrench caste categories permanently within political competition. Caste categories permanently within political competition. Therefore, therefore, caste census represents both democratization, caste census represents both democratization and institutionalization of identity. Democratization and institutionalization of identity. All right. Third is this aspect that we'll have a look at, right? Right. Change the paragraph, right? Third, right? There is a visible subcaste fragmentation. There is a visible subcaste fragmentation within the larger caste blocks. Within the larger caste blocks. Full stop, right? Earlier categories such as OBCs, earlier categories such as OBCs or Dalits, OBCs or Dalits were mobilized as broad coalitions. They were mobilized as broad coalitions. Full stop, right? Today, parties increasingly target subgroups. Today, parties increasingly target subgroups. Subgroups. Okay, increasingly target the subgroups such as non-dominant OBCs, comma, most backward classes, MBCs, most backward classes, and non-Jatav Dalits, non-Jatav Dalits. Right, this granular simplicity, when you have a full entity, this let's say is a complete entity. Granular means sections within this. So this granular social engineering, this granular social engineering indicates that caste politics, it indicates that caste politics has become more sophisticated. Caste politics has become more sophisticated and micromanaged. Sophisticated and micromanaged, reflecting, it reflecting competitive electoral strategies, reflecting competitive electoral strategies. Okay, reflecting the competitive electoral strategies rather than rather than, again a term that I had used, monolithic identity mobilization. Rather than monolithic identity mobilization, monolithic identity mobilization. Okay, so here you were also right. Ashutosh Varshne, Ashutosh Varshne argues that such fragmentation, Ashutosh Varshne argues that such fragmentation reduces the possibility, such fragmentation reduces the possibility of unified social justice. It reduces the possibility of unified social justice coalitions, right? So lesser unification will happen. Now there is fragmentation. So it reduces the possibility of unified, reduces the possibility of unified social justice coalitions and increases competitive populism, increases competitive populism, right? This trend suggests that caste politics is becoming, this trend suggests that caste politics is becoming more granular and strategic. It is becoming more granular and strategic rather than ideological, rather than ideological, rather than ideological, rather than ideological. Okay, so this is one. Next, we will also write next about, one second. Now here we'll write, right, another emerging trend, another emerging trend is the agitation of, another emerging trend is the agitation of traditionally dominant agrarian castes, the agitation of traditionally dominant agrarian castes such as Patidars, Marathas and Jats, such as Patidars, Marathas and Jats, demanding inclusion, okay, demanding inclusion within the reservations framework, demanding the inclusion within Okay, demanding inclusion within the reservation frameworks. Full stop, right? This phenomena reflects agrarian distress. This phenomena reflects this phenomena reflects agrarian distress, declining public sector employment, and rising economic insecurity. Rising economic insecurity. Full stop, right? It signals a transition. It signals a transition from backward inclusion to to in inverted commas you can write a term competitive backwardness. Competitive backwardness. Competitive backwardness where even privileged castes relatively privileged castes seek state protection. Okay, so we had written overall here that just complete this line termed competitive backwardness where even relatively privileged castes seek state protection. They seek state protection. They seek state protection in a changing economy. In a changing economy. So right, Nirja Gopal Jayal interprets, in case wants to write the spelling, Nirja Gopal Jayal interprets such demands as reflecting anxieties. Okay, such demands as reflecting the anxieties of declining agrarian elites, facing economic economic liberalization, facing economic liberalization. Okay. Anxieties of declining agrarian elites facing economic liberalization and shrinking state employment. Next, right, Akhil Gupta. Okay, Akhil Gupta links these movements to rural distress and uneven development. Okay, so again, this is what we can overall mention here, right? Right. This phenomena shows that caste politics is increasingly shaped by this phenomena shows that the caste politics is increasingly shaped by economic insecurity, economic insecurity rather than rather than ritual hierarchy. This is also an important point, right? Competitive backwardness. Caste politics is increasingly shaped by economic insecurity rather than ritual hierarchy. Rather than ritual hierarchy. Okay. Rather than ritual hierarchy. Now, the last part which we can also mention here, this is right, right? Urbanization and economic modernization, urbanization and economic modernization were once expected, they were once expected to weaken, they were once expected to caste, weaken caste, full stop, right? Instead, caste persists in new forms. Instead, caste persists in new forms as seen in as seen in marriage patterns, as seen in marriage patterns, comma professional networks, as seen in marriage patterns, professional networks, comma housing clusters, and political funding channels. Okay, so right, full stop. More as Caste today operates more as social capital, social capital and network advantage. Social capital and network advantage. Social capital and network advantage. Okay. Right. Now, one more point just to add on this, you can write, right? Satish Deshpande, Satish Deshpande highlights, okay, very influential sociologist. Satish Deshpande highlights, in inverted commas, you can write upper class invisibility. He mentions, sorry, not class, right? Upper caste, upper caste invisibility, which demonstrates how privilege exists, which demonstrates how privilege exists even when caste discourse, even when the caste discourse declines, even when the caste discourse declines. All right. Then we can also write next paragraph, right? There is an intersection of caste with class and gender. There is an intersection, we've already seen the term intersection if you recall, with class and gender. Full stop, right? Economic inequality, okay. So just I'll repeat the line. So there's an intersection of caste with class and gender. Full stop. Economic inequality in India continues to overlap significantly. Economic inequality in India continues to overlap significantly with caste. Okay, full stop, right? Dalit and Adivasi communities remain overrepresented. Dalit and Adivasi communities continues to remain overrepresented in informal labor sectors, in informal labor sectors. Okay, informal labor sectors, while upper caste dominate, while the upper caste dominate higher education and elite services. They dominate higher education and elite services. Full stop, right? Dalit women experience layered marginalization. They experience layered marginalization at the intersection of caste, class, and gender. Okay. Intersection of caste, class, and gender. Adding adding complexity adding complexity to identity based politics. Adding complexity to identity based politics. And last we'll write, finally, caste has entered the digital sphere. It has entered the digital sphere. Full stop. Right. Social media platforms have enabled new forms of assertion, new forms of assertion, counter histories, counter histories, and political mobilization. Full stop. Right. Ambedkarite, Ambedkarite networks, Ambedkarite networks, subcaste forums, subcaste forums, and online activism have reshaped how caste identity is articulated. They've reshaped how caste identity is articulated and defended. Therefore, therefore, caste in contemporary India, we're now at the end of it, right? Caste in contemporary India operates across multiple layers. It operates across multiple layers. Put a dash, right? Electoral, economic, institutional, and digital. It operates across multiple layers: electoral, economic, institutional, and digital. Post operate. It has evolved from ritual hierarchy. It has evolved from ritual hierarchy to political mobilization, to political mobilization, and now to a data driven and digitally articulated identity. Okay. And now just one last line to end this. You can write, right? Under modernity, rather than disappearing under modernity, caste continues to adapt. Caste continues to adapt, reflecting both the resilience, of cleavages, and the flexibility, of democratic politics, flexibility of democratic politics. Okay, flexibility of democratic politics. All right. So this is one section that we have seen related to caste in Indian politics. Now we will go into, I'll do this in two ways, right? First, of course, I'll tell you religion in Indian politics. And here also in the contemporary trend, we will have a detailed discussion also on the UCC, the Uniform Civil Code. Okay, Article 44, Directive Principles of State Policy, right? And the recent the update related to Uttarakhand, we'll have a look at, right? So first, let's try to. So what I'll do, I'll give you first around 20 minutes or so. We'll have an overview of the topic of religion, right? We'll understand all the major dimensions and contours of this topic, and the more detailing extra part, we'll do that in the next class overall. So first, when I say religion in Indian politics, okay, we will go into the history also. Again, try to recall. We've seen the preamble. We've seen the Indian nationalism here. What does Indian preamble say? The preamble says that or in fact, it tells you about the nature of Indian state: sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. Yes, the word secular was not originally mentioned in the preamble. This was added by the 42nd constitutional amendment. Okay. So here we again talk about the moment I have to talk about religion in Indian politics. Okay. I will directly go into, okay, what is the nature. First, I'll tell you of Indian, not state, but first I'll tell you nature of Indian society. Right? What is the nature of Indian society? Right? Now, the nature of Indian society, what is that? Deeply religious. And despite being deeply religious, we became a secular state. We did not become a theocratic state. Yes. And in fact, when I say we became a secular state, our interpretation, if you again recall, of secularism is very different. Yes or no? So when I'm saying we became secular, so there are a couple of interpretations to be had here, right? Of course, India is religious. We're not irreligious, right? First thing. And main thing is Indian secularism is not the same as the Western secularism. That is also true. Again, try to recall when I say secularism, and we've already done Machiavelli, etc. So there is going to be a strict separation between the church and the state. There's a strict separation between the religion and the state, as you see in the Western secularism. Okay. In fact, if we take the example of France, they would go to the extent that even the use of religious identity markers in the public is not allowed. Right? Whereas, if I say Indian secularism, the state, of course, does not have any official religious identity. The state is equidistant. We use the term principal distance, of course, borrowing from the phrase of Rajiv Bhargav. Right? So there is a equidistant, there is going to be a principal distance that one can look into, which one can talk about here in this manner. So when I'm saying the state is deeply religious, okay, of course, sorry, the society is deeply religious, whereas the state is secular in nature. The constitution is secular. We have Article 25, 26, 27, 28, and of course the rights of the minorities in Article 29 and 30 of the Indian constitution, right? So when we are looking at the nature of Indian society, what do we see here? That while the society is religious, it has adopted secularism. Okay? And here it is very important to understand. I'll quote Charles Taylor here. Okay, a very important let's say personality with respect to the commentaries on religion. Okay? So here Charles Taylor simply says that secularism is essential. It is very important in these pluralistic societies. And why is secularism essential in the deeply pluralistic societies? So that the different sections of the society, they can continue to coexist. Right? If secularism would not be there, it will be very difficult for these societies to function. Okay? So in fact, he simply the argument is that pluralism, or in pluralistic societies, secularism is essential to ensure fairness. Right? It is very important. It is important to ensure fairness. Right? So this is one basic aspect that we can say. Now, if I say there is religion in society. Okay, now because of this, would there be identity? If there is identity, can there be political mobilization? If there will be political mobilization, what does the state do? Let's say, what is the response of the state? This we'll try to examine. So when I'm looking at India, okay, of course, again remember, we have equidistant or principal distance model, right? So we don't follow the absolute strict separation between the religion and the state. In Indian case, for example, we've seen examples of, let's say, if there is going to be a regressive practice, so the state can intervene. State can also help. Let's say we've seen the case of Hajj subsidies, etc., etc. So that is one aspect that we can talk about. All right. Now, when we are looking at the religion in society, of course, there will be identity, there will be mobilization. In this case, the state is secular. This we know. However, we do not want communalism, right? But again, if you look at the history, right, if you look at the partition, think of again the creation of Muslim League. So here I'll tell you a few historical facts. The state is secular, right? But there has been various aspects even before, right? So when I'm saying even before, there are few things that one has to understand here, right? So one by one, if I give you certain examples in this case, right? So the first thing, that if I talk about uh, the case of religion in India, in fact, if I go even before independence, that will give us certain concrete points, and then we'll see how to interpret these points. Okay. Now, one second. Right. So, for example, if I even start with 1857, think of the 1857 revolt. Okay. Now, here also there was a mutiny, and here we directly see even the British trying to appease the Hindus also, right? In fact, in the book of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, again he would profess the loyalty of the Muslims towards the British, and saying that it is not because of Muslims the mutiny has happened. And you will see some small base or maybe some classification being done, okay, by the Britishers here. If you look at 1857, okay, and from this you will see more and more issues. So, for example, there was a Hindu Urdu controversy in the north part of India, right? Let's say the Hindu Urdu controversy. Next, if I talk about the partition of Bengal, and think of British policy of divide and rule, because we have to also trace, when I look at religion in Indian politics, what was happening before independence. So there is the partition of Bengal, okay, and you will see the again the policy of appeasement, okay, of the Muslims by the British. This would also create certain challenges. This is also one example we can say. Next, what we also see here, right, is, if you recall, the okay, the Monte Mirlo, this Government of India Act 1909, and the case of the separate electorate for the very first time for the Muslims. And in the Government of India Act 1919, this was again extended to the Sikhs and Anglo Indians. The main thing is it started here. Okay. So this again was a challenge which had started separate electorates. Okay. In fact, I can give more examples here, right? For example, the formation of Muslim League. Okay. In fact, if you recall, in 1932, around the Pune Pact, you had a communal award. Communal award. Okay. Right. Now, One, if there is a creation of Muslim League, there is also the creation of later on Hindu Mahasabha. Okay, and the whole theory of Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, Savarkar theory. So what you will see here, that even before the independence, there is going to be a lot of, let's say, segregation, appeasement policy, etc., trying to almost create a divide. So the historical aspect of what the religion was doing should be very clear to us, very first thing. And in fact, if we say what happened just immediately after independence, main thing is we see the horrors of the partition, the issues that we continue to face even today. Even this aspect, okay, is one thing that we can talk about. Yes. So when we are looking at, so what we have seen, we were talking about religion, secularism, and when I say communalism, and then I went to communalism just before independence, right? So here what we need to understand, that there are some basic terms till now that we have seen. Okay, we have seen what is basically religion, or let's say overall what is secularism. That is one thing. Okay, second thing is communalism, and we have only focused on the instances of communalism before independence, right? It also continued post independence. Okay, and this part also I'll discuss and also link that to politics, but right now we're just trying to see certain perspectives here, right? And this part can also mix with nationalism, for example religious nationalism, etc., right? So one is, if you see these aspects we can talk about it. Okay, so this is one. Now the question is, and because in this topic we're doing it from a political science perspective, I've told you the term communalism. Okay, if I ask you, why do the communal conflicts happen? Are they mere sporadic events? Are they planned events? Are these events maybe engineered? Or is there an instrumentalist perspective? So the point here is, different scholars have analyzed it. Okay, and I'll just tell you what is the interpretation here, right? So basically there are four major perspectives on this. There is an essentialist perspective. Okay, there is an instrumentalist perspective, there is an institutionalist perspective, and I'll explain all the four to you, so you will not have any, let's say, uh, specific doubt. So one is essentialist, instrumentalist, okay, institutionalist, and the last one is social constructivist. Okay, now if we have to talk about these four perspectives one by one, okay, essentialist simply means that, for example, if I am looking at the Hindus and the Muslims, according to this perspective, right, this perspective simply says that both of them, they have conflicting interests. They are going to be clashes. They would not see generally an eye to an eye. Okay, conflicting interests, these are antagonist groups. If the groups are antagonist, it is of no surprise to us that they're going to fight, and they're always going to fight. In fact, it is this group, the theory, essentialist theory, which will support the two nation theory, that the Hindus and the Muslims cannot stay and would not have harmony with each other, and which is also why they have to have separate nations. So when we look at, let's say, Muhammad Ali Jinnah in the later phases, and later on the views of the Muslim League, they had proposed ultimately the two nation theory, right? So this is view, the essentialist view, simply is linked to, and in fact would support, the two nation theory. I hope this you are able to easily understand. Okay, so mainly the core argument here is both Hindus and Muslims, they have competing interest, oh sorry, they have conflicting interest, they have antagonistic interest, they cannot live in harmony. This is the core argument. Okay, so this is one. Now instrumentalist perspective is what we see in Bipin Chandra's analysis, right? And the moment you see the term instrumentalist, we've already seen at least the meaning of the term instrumentalist. Think of instrumentalist theory of state, relative autonomy theory. This perspective says that people themselves are not communal. People by default are not communal, right? People are used as an instrument by, let's say, certain elite sections. And this is what causes a communal conflict. People really don't want to fight, for example, per se, they don't have this inclination, but they would do so because they are mobilized by certain elites. Now, of course, when these elites can also be religious as elites, these elites would have certain vested interests. So it is precisely because of these vested interests and the mobilization of the religious elites that the people are fighting. Otherwise, the people would have not fought just because of themselves. They would not have fought. This is the instrumentalist theory. So one, there is essentialist theory. One, second, there is instrumentalist theory. Okay, so this is also one. Third, we look at the institutionalist theory. Okay, here the focus more is on the state. For example, Romila Thapar, okay, would mention this theory. Okay, so this it is these communal conflicts are happening because of, right, the divisive policies of the state. It is the state which creates the divide. So the divisive policy, if I'm writing, divisive policies of the states is what ultimately leads to the creation of these conflicts. Communal conflicts are happening because of the divisive politics. Okay, and the last one is social constructivist. In fact, this term we'll also see in IR, the social constructivist theory. See, social constructivist theory is what? Let's say the communities are fighting without verifying the facts. Okay, and here simply, if I just say in very simple terms, truth is also construction. I have told you something, now you've started to believe it, you maybe have not verified it, and this has maybe passed on to certain generations or ages. This is meaning of social constructivist. Okay, when I'm speaking something to you, the thing would have certain meaning. Many times people or the communities add, attach, associate meanings to certain words. Okay, now this also can happen. So that element is construction. Now we as human beings, okay, we interpret things always because of maybe of some bias that we have. So somebody's, let's say community A is interpreting a thing or community B is interpreting a thing, there can be differences in their interpretation. This is overall exemplified by the social constructivist theory, almost even saying that truth is also fabricated. And when I'm saying fabricated, it means there can be different versions of it. So the communities are fighting also because there have been different narratives that have been set up. Maybe it has not been verified as much. There is a lot of divisiveness created because of these narratives. Of course, we can say these narratives can also be politically exploited, which ends up the people fighting for the resources, perhaps. Even this thing we can also do. Okay, and over the period of time people will have very entrenched beliefs, very hard beliefs. That also leads to these challenges and problems, right or no? So this is again something that you will keep in mind, right? An overview of why are the communal conflicts happening in the first place. And till now I have given you an overview of certain terms here. Second, some events. This is also important just to build a base. We'll go into more aspects even after the independence, what has happened. But we have to understand, when I look at religion in Indian politics, without going into the party lines, for example, I just want to examine, and we want to examine, what or why, for example, a deeply religious society has a secular state, for example, right? Why is that this happening? Okay, the nature of Indian society and some a couple of basic aspects in this regard. All right. So here, before we almost wrap it up, we'll write a couple of lines and then we'll continue from there on. Okay, right. All right. Religion occupies a paradoxical position in Indian politics. Religion occupies it occupies a paradoxical position okay, a paradoxical position in Indian politics. Full stop, right? India is a deeply religious society. India is a deeply religious society, yet it constitutionally commits itself, yet it constitutionally commits itself to secularism. It constitutionally commits itself to secularism. Full stop, right? This tension between faith, this tension between faith and constitutional neutrality, faith and constitutional neutrality has shaped much of India's political trajectory. This has shaped much of India's political trajectory. Full stop, right? In plural and heterogeneous societies, in plural and heterogeneous societies, secularism becomes not merely an ideological preference, an ideological preference. It becomes not merely an ideological preference, but a political necessity. But a political necessity. Full stop, right? Charles Taylor, comma, the communitarian scholar. Charles Taylor, the communitarian scholar, argues that secularism in diverse societies is required. In diverse societies is required to ensure fairness, among competing religious identities, to ensure fairness among competing religious identities and to prevent domination by any single community. Okay, prevent domination by any single community. Full stop, right? In India, therefore, secularism was designed not to eliminate religion from public life. Secularism was designed not to eliminate religion from public life, but but to regulate its relationship with the state. But to regulate its relationship with the state. Okay. Now, when we will continue from the next part, we'll also see what is communalism and what are the various approaches. In fact, the four approaches that we saw. Okay, the instrumentalist view, institutionalist view, etc., with respect to communalism, and then the remaining aspects. And then I'll tell you the politics part, right? How does religion impact the politics in India, right? The communal events, etc., that happens. So we'll also see the contemporary aspect, like we've seen for caste. Okay. So here again, try to make proper notes of what we're doing. Again, try to revise at least once if you're able to do so, right? That will help you. Okay. I'll now meet you in the next lecture when we again have a more detailed discussion on this part. And after religion, we'll be doing the ethnicity aspect. All right, then. We'll meet you in the next class. Thank you.